Why should teachers change to a learner-centered approach to instruction? The answer is actually very simple. 15 years of neuroscience, biology, and cognitive psychology research findings on how humans learn offer this powerful and singular conclusion. It is the one who does the work who does the learning. This conclusion strongly suggests that the traditional model of teacher-centered instruction, where teachers do a lot of the work, is less effective and can be detrimental to students' learning. Therefore, a new approach is needed that gets the students to do most of the learning work. And that approach is learner-centered teaching. Students have very specific sets of ideas about how school is supposed to be based on their 12 or more years of being in school. When someone says those roles must change, which is exactly what happens when introducing a learner-centered practice, students often react in ways that are not accepting or even hostile. 12 years is a long time to do something one way, especially when that way, for many of our students, has been rewarded with high grades and accolades. Students often resist, at least initially, the roles and responsibilities that come with doing more of the work simply because this has never been asked of them before in a school setting. A teacher-centered practice simply requires less work from the students. Students can often go weeks without any assignment due or even a quiz to study for. Changing to a learner-centered practice where work is due on a regular basis, where class time is spent trying to solve problems and figure out complex ideas instead of listening to a lecture, is a very different form of school. It's one that students need help adjusting to. As we all know, change can be difficult to accept. Why discussion over other information deliveries? If multiple brains almost always outperform single brains, which research clearly says is true, then why is discussion the least used learning tool in higher education? National studies indicate that only 1% to 3% of classroom time is spent in discussion. Ironically, our students will spend more of their professional lives talking and listening to people than doing any other activity. On group projects, the study of human evolution also provides strong evidence that human survival depends on humans working together. If humans didn't help each other adapt to new environments or solve new problems, they wouldn't have survived. Collaborating with others made survival possible. It was always better to have more than one person keeping an eye out for a hungry tiger, or to have 4 people attack a mammoth rather than one. In keeping with the survival instinct, having students do their work in groups, teams, triads, or pairs has its origins in human evolution. Try this example. Add 17 and 55 together in your head. How many added the numbers in columns, carrying the 1 to the 10s column just like they would do on paper? How many added 10 to 55 to get 65 and then 7 to 65 to get 72? How many added 20 to 55 and subtracted 3 to get 72? How many used another way? This exercise demonstrates that even with the simplest cognitive process, people don't think alike and don't use the same tools to get their answers. This means that there is often something to be learned by working with others. In this particular case, those who used columns could learn a more efficient system of computing the answer from the students who added 10 or added 20 and subtracted. In most cases, multiple brains outperform single brains. Medina, 2008, page 19. What has changed that requires a shift in the classroom? Americans now consume information for about 1.3 trillion hours each year, an average of almost 12 hours per day. Total information consumption totaled 3.6 zettabytes and 10,845 trillion words, with each person using in some form 34 gigabytes of information on an average day. In contrast, people living in the mid-1800s would have consumed in their lifetimes less information than is published in 1 week of the New York Times. The point is that students will need to become lifelong, independent learners, whether they like it or not, if they hope to stay employed. Page 28. What does this look like in practice? If you ever visit my classroom, you will likely find me sitting on my stool watching my students engage in the day's learning activity. The reason I am just sitting and apparently not teaching is that I have already completed my work when I planned the activities that are now prompting my students to do their work. You might catch me doing a brief presentation, answering some questions, or debriefing the students following an activity, but in my classroom, students do the work. This is the goal of LCT. I am a facilitator of learning. This means my two main jobs are planning learning activities and giving students feedback. Why make the shift? The reasons to embrace this sharing process begins with the fact that it is the students' learning, not ours. Yes, we share a responsibility for the learning, but it is not about us. It is, in fact, all about the students. If we are doing what we want to do in the classroom, what is best for us or easiest for us, then we have lost our way as teachers. The classroom has to be about what is best for the learners, even if it is more time-consuming and demanding for us. Rationales for why we want to share power. It is their learning, not ours, so they should have a big say in it. Sharing creates ownership for the students in their learning experience. Sharing power creates community. It moves the classroom away from the teacher versus students model. Sharing shifts responsibility to the students where it belongs. They will be responsible for their own learning the rest of their lives, and they need to practice that now. Traditional methods of letting students listen passively to lectures and then use a short burst of intensive study to cram for a test 3 or 4 times a semester does not result in students forming new neural networks. If we are to ensure that our students receive the optimal level of preparation to face the many possible futures that await them, we need to measure their learning using the very tools that learning will be measured against when they leave our institutions. I have never met an employment recruiter or grad school admission rep that asked to meet the students that were good note takers or excelled on multiple choice tests. The message students have heard loud and clear from teachers since they entered first grade is that grades matter. I would like to report that our education systems are moving away from this position, but that would be a big lie. Students know grades can equal graduate school, a better job, scholarship dollars, and bragging rights. So having a discussion about the best ways for students to earn their grades in our courses seems like an important discussion to have. Don't be surprised if some students do not want to share power. It's not that they want all the power, but the opposite. They are so conditioned by 12 or more years of teacher-centered education that either they don't feel it is their place to give input, or they just prefer to be told what to do. As we know, the problem with telling students what to do is that it is out of line with the real world of work. students will be expected to give input. In fact, their input will often aid their advancement. Sharing power is a crucial part of any learner-centered teaching practice. We need to help our students begin the process of taking control of their own learning, even if they don't want to.